Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll wait another minute or two before we start the final roundtable for today, which is on the Global South and what direction the international order is heading towards. So I'll just wait another 1 or 2 minutes to see if the rest of our panelists are here. Yeah, everyone's here? Okay, everyone is here. So everyone in the coffee break, just bring your coffees in, bring your snacks in. This is the final roundtable. My name is Zoon Ahmed Khan. I'm a research fellow at the Center for China and Globalization, and it's really an honor for me to host this roundtable. And the topic is the rise of the Global South and whether we are heading towards a multipolar world or a divided world. And I think if I'll just give a brief introduction. Today, the entire day, we have talked about how the international order is evolving, how there are new challenges, how there is a global south and maybe a global north. Is it an international legal order? Is it a rules-based order? Is it a norms-based order? I think sometimes, even in conversation, it's hard, or I've heard people respond that the global south is maybe imagined, or what really does it mean? And while we start this conversation, I think one thing we can all establish is that nobody believes that the Global South is a monolith. It is really a part of the world, the majority of the world, that has had a shared experience. Until not very long ago, the Global South was even referred to as the Third World. It was somehow in the waiting room of history. It was somehow expected to accept domination and to be told what to do and how to think. And today, no matter what, whether we are in a multipolar world, whether the world is multipolarizing, I think one thing is important to accept, that today this third world supposedly, or what is the Global South, does have greater representation. It has a greater degree to exert its agency. We are creating platforms, whether it's BRICS, the SCO, whether it's regional initiatives, look at ASEAN, look at the African Union, and so many others, that are trying to collectively increase our agency, increase networks, improve our circumstances. And in that, obviously, China has an important role to play. So today's conversation is going to be about, whether this journey, which is obviously these regions are dynamic, these countries are dynamic, they are building their capacities, but are we going in a direction that will lead to more, unity, a world that is multipolar in the sense that we are reaching greater consensus on issues that matter to all of us? Or are we going to be more divided? And I think it's a big question, but we have a brilliant panel to tackle some of these questions about this emerging world order. And we'll try, stay within 5 minutes each for now, and get as much, contribute as much to this very important discussion of an emerging world. So without further ado, I will welcome our first panelist to make their remarks, who is Ahmed Aboudouh, Head of China Studies at the Emirates Policy Center, to try and crack this equation.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for CCG for the invitation. And I know this is the last panel and all of us are half sleepy, so I will make things very light and be very concise. So I want to start by rephrasing and borrowing the famous saying by Alexander Wendt, which basically says the world order is what states and individuals make of it. That means that the world order, in my view, is the total sum of countries' and individuals' perceptions and discourse, and what they make of it. And I would like to share some observations from Global South countries' perspective on what the Global South, what the world order looks like right now and where it is heading. And because we are in China, I would like to focus on Global South-China relations. I might slightly disagree with the saying that we are living in a fragmented world order. I think we passed this point a long time ago. I think we are in a transitional period from one thing to another, from the liberal rules-based international order to something that nobody is sure about yet. Nobody can predict. It's too early, and it might take 2 or 3 decades to take shape. And this is because people in the Global South like to think about the world order, from my understanding, differently than the main components that have been discussed this morning, which is the peace, development, and human rights. I think the more prevalent perception is based on US West leadership as the main anchor of the global order, multilateral institutions, liberal principles, or the glue that brings the world order together, and the rule of law. However, none of these components are functional now. None of them. You could see the United States withdrawing from its leadership, especially in its relationship with its closest allies. You could see the liberal principles are being neglected increasingly, especially under the current administration. And also the international law is selectively applied, and this is a very famous perception, and you could hear double standards and hypocrisy a lot in the Global South. And you could see that the liberal component of the rules-based international order disappearing. So where does China fit in the Global South strategic thinking? And I'm not talking here about the Global South as a single entity, don't get me wrong. It is very diversified and dynamic. But in the end of the day, there are things that a lot of countries in the Global South share when they talk about the global order. And the most common thing is that they think of China as a country that can actually balance the United States power in the world. That's why they cling on their partnerships and relationships with China. They take it very seriously. And the most interesting thing, and this is my own personal understanding, about this power is not the military power or economic power of China, although they are very, very important in their calculations, but the normative offerings that China is trying to promote in the Global South. For example, the very famous concept of a community of shared future, which is the alternative of the new security concept after the end of the Cold War, and the 4 global initiatives: security, development, civilization, and the recently launched governance global initiative. So people in the Global South, or policymakers and scholars, try to understand what these principles are about. They have never heard anything like that before, and they want to understand how the Chinese are doing things. The second one is we are living in an era of decentralization through power diffusion. And by that, I mean we are seeing the rise of middle powers in the Global South and their aspiration and desire to play an important role in shaping the next global order. And they are doing this by wanting more reliance on Chinese economic and tech prowess through the Belt and Road Initiative and other bilateral cooperation mechanisms. And at the same time, they want the UN to stay in the center of the global order, but also they are very interested in multilateral platforms led by China, like the BRICS Plus, SCO, and AIIB. So where does that leave us? And I will be very, very concise here. It is true that the United States power is declining, and this is becoming a consensus now all over the Global South. But at the same time, China also is facing challenges, whether that is economic challenges, security challenges in its peripheries, strategic competition and pressure from the United States, and attempts to suffocate China's innovation ecosystem. That makes, from a Global South perspective, that makes the global order unstable, because none of these great powers can, or when it comes to China, willing to achieve primacy over the other. So what do they do to avoid the implications? I think they do 3 main things. And ironically, when I go to the Gulf states, for example, built on what the Australian speaker said, they want to learn from Australia and Singapore's model of navigating great power competition. The first one is diversification of the trade and security and economic partnerships. The second one is minilateralism instead of large multilateral groupings. And this creates subsequently more regionalization of trade, economic cooperation, and security, because they see these small groupings, like-minded countries, as a hedge against the ineffectiveness of the classic multilateral platforms. And also, they see it as a protection from the rise of nationalism and trade protectionism and anti-globalization in the West. And the last one is hedging, which is simply compartmentalizing their partnerships in economy and take with China, and security, many of them with the United States. And actually, I would stop here and say just a comment that hedging is working. You could see in Saudi Arabia, for example, from a pariah state, now MBS, yesterday with President Trump signing very strategic agreements in the White House. But later on, if there is time, I would like to also delve into the challenges that China faces in the Global South. If you like me to go through them quickly, or stop here and maybe come back later.
40 seconds.
40 seconds, okay. The first one is, I think many people in the Global South think that China needs to clarify whether it wishes to play a greater role in crises, in mediation and crisis, solving the crises. In other words, balancing and reconcile China's contribution in mediation and its risk-averse foreign policy. The second one is they need to clarify and explain these initiatives, these normative offerings, because in fact, a lot of these concepts align and resonate with what Global South are expecting. The third one is trade protectionism might create the incentive for these countries to raise trade barriers against some Chinese goods because they want to protect their own industrial bases. And the last one is China needs to do more to learn how to navigate the competition within Global South and the differences and the adversaries that are going on in the Global South. Sorry, I'll stop here.
That was a masterclass in time management. Thank you. Okay, excellent. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see how China's role will evolve, the challenges that a rising power can face. And I also, now as we come to our next panelist, Mr. Mohamed Amersi, founder and chairman of the Amersi Foundation, I just want to quickly make a very brief comment because of paucity of time, but I'll say that maybe somehow the perception that the world is divided may also be created because not very long ago, we used to say this is the silent majority, It was silenced. They weren't expressing their perspectives, and now increasingly they're looking for ways to move forward. And in that process, I mean, their unique vantage points or their unique desires are becoming more visible, apparent, and even coming in the institutional frameworks, right? So what do you think, Mr. Amersi? First of all, where are we headed? And do you think it's more of a perception that the world is divided, or it's just because we are less silent than before? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zoon, for moderating this panel. In the past, when I've spoken on this topic, I've spoken of a multipolar world, a world in which military dominance is in the hands of the United States, economic dominance is in the hands of China, and then there is a technopolar world where the netizens, the people of the net, are all united. And then there are countries that will lead in climate change, countries that will lead in technology. But having reflected on this for, say, the last few months, I've come to the view, at least, that this multipolarity represents wishful thinking. It represents an aspiration. And whether we will see this aspiration become reality or not, I just don't know. Today, though, what I would like to talk about is a possibility that we see a stagnant order and we see the end of the rising powers. This is quite provocative in terms of what we might expect, but nonetheless, I think it's worth having a slightly different point of view so that we can debate this. In 1898, as the United Kingdom joined other powers in carving up the once mighty King Empire, the British Prime Minister, Lord Salisbury, warned a London audience that the world was dividing into living and dying nations. The living were the rising powers of the industrial age, states with growing populations, transformative technologies, and militaries of unprecedented range and firepower. The dying nations were stagnant empires, crippled by corruption, clinging to obsolete methods, and sliding towards ruin. Salisbury feared that the ascent of some colliding with the decline of others would hurl the world into catastrophic conflict. The era of rapid power transitions among states, fueled by demographic booms, industrial breakthroughs, and territorial expansion, is ending. No country today is rising quickly enough to disrupt the global balance. China, once seen as the next great challenger, is already, in some people's view, peaking, while other candidates like Japan, Russia, and the EU started stagnating much earlier. The United States faces its own issues, but remains ahead of rivals who are worse off demographically and economically. India may have demographic potential, but lacks the education and state capacity to convert it into real global power. As the engines that powered historical rising powers stall, the world is settling into a closed club of aging, incumbent powers surrounded by less influential middle powers, developing states, and failing nations. They say of history that it is more than the path left by the past. It influences the present and it can shape the future, but perhaps not this time around. The emergence of modern rising powers to the Industrial Revolution, which allowed productivity, population, and military strength to compound for the first time in history. In the pre-industrial era, empires grew only slowly, but from the 19th century onwards, new entrants like the US, Germany, and Japan rapidly gained power. The Great Divergence then set the stage for over a century of disruptive power transitions. Today's headwinds suggest that productivity is slowing, populations are peaking or shrinking, and the scope for territorial conquest or economic catch-up has greatly diminished. Significant technological leaps like those that defined earlier eras have become rare. And today's digital transformations, while substantial, have not delivered the same compounding societal gains. Demographic decline among major countries, including China and most of the West, means loss of power is likely to be permanent, unlike in the past century. A lot is said about catch-up nations. China, despite its manufacturing prowess and scale, relies on a high capital, low return growth model, faces severe demographic decline, and remains dependent on foreign technology for critical goods. India's demographic advantage is undermined by weak education, infrastructure, and persistent poverty. Other latecomers are locked out by entrenched incumbents and constrained global trade. The global consequences of a stagnant order manifested by the end of the age of ascent will bring dangerous instability in the short run. Major powers facing stagnation may turn to militarization or irredentism. State failure is growing among heavily indebted countries with young, unemployed populations. Economic malaise and migration stoke extremism and democratic decline in the West, while autocracies exploit these fissures. Meanwhile, US foreign policy grows more unilateral and global institutions falter, raising the prospects of conflict and disorder. This reversal carries profound consequences. Over the long run, it may spare the world the ruinous cycle of rising powers, their quests for territory, resources, and status that so often ended in war. In the near term, though, stagnation and demographic shocks are spawning acute dangers. Fragile states are buckling under debt and youth bulges. Struggling powers are turning to militarization, and economic insecurity is stroking extremism and corroding democracies, while the United States drifts towards thuggish unilateralism. The age of rising powers is ending, but its immediate aftermath may prove no less violent, with the politics of migration, economic nationalization, and technological mismatch creating real risks to such a scenario. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very Hobbesian picture but it could be an unfortunate, I mean, it could be the reality. I think, one of the things that we're also trying to address in this panel is how, I mean, on some level, this conversation is, when we say we want to seek solutions, we do become aspirational, right? So from an aspiration-seeking vantage point, let me, ask our next panelist, Mr. He Wenping, who is researcher at the Institute of West Asian and African Studies of the Chinese Academy of Social Sciences, to avoid this potential, disaster, this Hobbesian world from becoming a reality. What do you think the Global South can do to increase the quality and the level of consensus, decisiveness? How do you think, and another point, when we think of China's global initiatives, whether it's development, civilization, security, and global governance initiative, which was also mentioned by Ahmed, I think one of the purposes is to create platforms or spaces where consensus can be established. So if you can speak a bit about what the Global South can do and what China is currently doing to reduce the chances of complete chaos. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, dear moderator. I think in order to respond to your question, I think two key words, maybe that's the solution. One is united.
Okay.
Global South country, you cannot be divided. When divided, you have no power at all. This Global South unite and the consolidated of this unity now is a fundamental one. Like every day, almost every day, I have contact with those African seminar groups come over to China, and then I offer some lecture and some workshop with them. So all the time, this is the key words we discussed. They regarded China not a threat at all. It's opportunity for reaching this Global South, this unity. Because now, as we discussed, obviously China now like a big elephant in the room. Well, of course, you need to take more responsibility and make more contribution for reach this this unity. So that is why I go to another question you just addressed, that is in what kind of platform, and what kind of mechanism we can make this Global South unity forward, even consolidated. That is, you see in Africa, we have been established called the FOCAC, Forum of China-Africa Cooperation. Actually has been doing every 3 years, will be minister-level meeting, and then from time to time, and then upgraded to summit. For example, last September, and the China-African Summit has been put forward, has been taken place, and not only just the lip service, talking club, come out with a lot of, action plan. Even measured by numbers, how many schools were being built, like 1,000 those small and beautiful projects, directly linked with people's livelihood in Africa countries. So this is a mechanism. Not only just China-Africa, this mechanism platform has been building. Of course, like BRICS has been expanded, all right? This also platform linking all those emerging countries together, and now many more want to be the member. And also, just yesterday, our Prime Minister was in Moscow to join that SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Also, even Egypt also wants to be the member of the SCO. Egypt already becoming the member of the FOCAC. Now moving to South Africa, Prime Minister Li Qiang joined the G20. G20 also now more inclusive. Africa and even African Union now become, South Africa used to be the member, now the African Union also becoming the member. China also push for this entrance of the African Union. So that is all the mechanism. Many, like ASEAN. Recently, these South Asian countries all together, now they become already 11 members, East Timor joined, but should notice another big event, that is this free trade zone already upgraded to 3.0 version now. many green development products, digital economy, now all getting in this free trade zone. So up leveled. So all those mechanisms, some for like international issue should be discussed, some for our economic cooperation. Yeah, make your strengths more, stronger, right? Without, like Donald Trump often used this, without strength, no peace. Peace coming from the strength. Okay, Global South, similar. Yeah, if without strength, yeah, there's no talking about Global South. By the way, before I wrap up, answer your question, I also want to address one thing. Yeah, when we talk about the Global South, many workshops now has been organized. But I do think should have a balanced view about even China and also Global South. Yeah, one is cannot be like overestimated its role, its position, and its influence. Another cannot underestimate it. Yeah, sometimes people go to those two extreme directions. Yeah, when talking about the Global South, saying, wow, since this is the Global South now already on the center point, influence all the issues in the world. So should have a clear understanding. Of course, compared with its own past, it has been increased. Of course, the influence. Yeah, that's why now G20 more influence. But you will see, okay, the U.S. White House doesn't want to see this increasing influence. Even saying South Africa has no qualification in this group. Of course, not join, even saying South Africa should be out of this G20. This is from the elegance. Of course, so still has compared with our past, of course, is more GDP share, this involvement in the global governance, but cannot be overestimated. You have to realize, geopolitically speaking, yeah, when this Ukraine crisis took place, I remember South Africa president also lead the African leaders travel to Ukraine, to Russia. Yeah, lots of efforts has been done, but even no reporting in the world. Well, you see, you have done something, but then even no reporting, which means, you are small, your opinion marginalized. Your role, of course, not talking and then not put it in the global media, right? In the global media also, CNN, BBC, right? So people, this is the opinion from this English program. And then, so the majority is silenced. The majority has no access, make the voice being heard. So this is the thing. But of course, cannot be underestimated as well. Yeah, some opinions saying, what is the Global South? I haven't seen them at all. Nowhere. This just seems talking. So those two ways have to have a balanced point of view. That's why you know where you are, and then know what kind of role can be played in a real sense. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I think that's where also this point about not overestimating, not underestimating, having a realistic perspective, and I think that's where Mr. Amersi's intervention is also extremely valuable, that we need to recognize the realities of where we stand as individual countries, as regions, as the challenges we face. Mere trajectory of relatively greater share in global GDP or education, I mean, all of that on one side, but that may not necessarily lead to a greater, significance when it comes to global matters, or the kind of multipolar world that we sit in these conferences, like you said, all talk, can it necessarily result in that? It might result in something more chaotic unless we utilize our agency and create some synergy. With that, let me now invite our next panelist, Jing Yuhong, who is Executive Director of Shanghai Zhongyou Information Services Corporation Limited, and former head of Greater China Operations for Oracle's Global Financial Division. So from your perspective, what do you think are the major contributors, potential contributors to the Global South's, broader share in global affairs? And I think especially from your work experience, how do you calculate the current situation?
Yeah, okay, it's a very interesting topic. So thank you for giving me this opportunity. So I will talk about all these factors that South South cooperation has included, both for China and for the southern countries, and also where to improve in the future. So South cooperation is a national policy that China has always adhered to. China has cooperated with numerous southern countries in government, international organizations, enterprises, and cultural exchanges, and is experiencing rapid development. China, why that happened for so long? China has advantages in administrative governance, funding, technology, and cost, while southern countries have advantages in labor and resources, rich and diverse ethnic cultures, and huge markets. So China-South cooperation is complementary and mutually beneficial, with broad development potential. Specifically, in following areas, China has enormous capacity and cost advantages. So these areas are like poverty alleviation, energy conservation and emission reduction, green economy, construction of major infrastructure such as energy and transportation, transfer of manufacturing industry, artificial intelligence, finance, China's social governance and corporate capabilities. So these areas, China can contribute a lot in this South-South cooperation. So at present, Chinese enterprises have entered almost all southern countries, including both state-owned enterprises of China and also a large number of private enterprises. So including numerous AI, IT, and advanced equipment manufacturing enterprises. So these collaborations are greatly promoting the living standards, technological development, and export capabilities of the host countries. The financial cooperation between China and many southern countries is also fastly flourishing. The BRICS banks, the Asian Investment Bank, and the major Chinese banks have greatly supported the construction of the Belt and the Road countries. So China has launched large-scale currency swaps with countries like Argentina, and also is preparing for this overseas issuance of RMB stablecoins in the future. Many southern countries have excellent ideas, so as exchange to China, okay, to be beneficial. So they have excellent ideas, diverse cultures, abundant natural resources, and vast markets, all of which benefit China in South-South cooperation. So the rapid progress and development of southern countries have also provided valuable opportunities for China's own development. So we have both get benefit a lot from this kind of development of cooperation. So where to improve in the future? So from both sides. So Chinese overseas enterprises should pay special attention to the policies, regulations, and the culture of the host countries. They should not only focus on economic interests, but also on social and brand effects. So to focus on more, on the social environment of the hosting countries. And the southern countries should also get some improvement, should attach importance to social governance, provide a safe environment, reduce the burden on enterprises, and manage and protect the China companies' compliant operations in accordance with their domestic law. So that's my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And I think for a lot of people, especially when we talk about countries with Belt and Road Cooperation, they can see the evolution of the presence of Chinese enterprises in the last 10 years, that, how to maybe incorporate more social aspects as well, how to see, medium, long-term well-being, all of that. This is a process of mutual learning and evolution. Now let's bring in our next, we do have slight paucity of time, so I will request everyone to stay within 5 minutes if possible. And my question to our next panelist, Arun Mahizdan, who is a special advisor, Institute of Policy Studies, Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, National University of Singapore. My question to you is, we are talking about South-South consensus building for a successful multipolar world, right? If you can also, apart from the key points, also touch upon, because as Singapore, you are known for to be a platform, to be a country where North-South consensus is also being prioritized. So what do you think is the role and the importance of better North-South consensus in our journey towards a successful world? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Khan. Very good afternoon to everyone. First, I would like to thank CCG for inviting me to speak in this forum. It is a privilege to be among such distinguished people, especially among the young leaders. Let me first answer the original question. Is multipolar world or divided world in the making? And it's a question not just for the global south, but I think it's for the entire planet. I think everyone will agree that every nation, without exception, does, will, and must act in its own interests. However, does it automatically mean that it must act against some other nation's interest? Not necessarily. It is possible to have collective interests. The idea of the coalition of the willing is now well established. Nations can and do come together for common causes and common purposes. In the traditional concept of world order, we had bipolar world order, and for a brief moment after the collapse of USSR, a unipolar world order. But the problem with those world orders was there was always a hegemon whose own interests subjugated all other interests. Whether it was US or the USSR, it was the same. Today, everyone agrees that the bipolar and unipolar world orders don't operate anymore. But is a multipolar world order now in place? I'm not sure. Here, I would like to borrow heavily from an idea that Professor Amitabh Acharya has articulated recently. By the way, he has addressed this forum, and he conveys his greetings to you, Dr. Wang. What Professor Acharya is putting forward is a multiplex world order in his book, The Once and Future World Order. I think all of you are familiar with the idea of a multiplex cinema where you can go in, choose the theater and the movie you want to watch, and you can get out when you finish watching. We are already seeing the beginning of this multiplex world order. Some countries, including China, is are in some grouping or another, and not in others. Nations choose what mutual interests suit them best. As I mentioned at the start, it is a coalition of the willing. While some country or other will try to dominate as they are used to, we are seeing a strong resistance to hegemonic world orders, which is why the disintegration of the old bipolar and unipolar world orders is really a good thing for the world. On the other hand, a divided world, but which can come together on the basis of mutual interest and mutual respect, can also be a very good thing for the world. In fact, it might be a better arrangement in the long run, as it is dynamic, purposeful, and ultimately mutually beneficial. Even United Nations, where all the countries of the world are supposed to be under one system, where everyone is equal, we have discovered some are more equal than others. UN is shaken to the core because, as we have seen heard earlier today, a few hegemons are still trying to keep the UN as their own tool for dominance rather than an instrument for the good of the world. While I'm not advocating the abolition of the UN, it is my humble view it's time for the world to build other world institutions that have common interests and mutual respect. A multiplex world order seems a good idea. Now, to answer your specific question about what Singapore is doing, of course we are part of the South, but the word South is no longer as rigid or as applicable as it used to be, because many nations in the South have become the North of the current and the future world. And I think we have to now look at what the greatest thing that Singapore does is, because it is so small, so insignificant, we want to be friends with everyone, as many friends as possible. So our greatest mantra is be as useful to as many people. And in the other part of our life is we learn a great deal from everyone because we are so small and so young. So I don't know what others can learn from Singapore, but our survival depends on being alert and being respectful and then being useful. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Alert, please. I think that's very precise. Alert, respectful, useful. Perfect. I think every country, especially developing countries, there's also debate right now. A lot of the countries that are still, like you said, some traditionally global South are no longer the South. They have become the North. And those that are, to what extent it is their own agency, their own governance systems, or their own, inability to bring required reforms or prioritizing development that keeps us in that state. So I think, to learn from Singapore. A lot of countries do. Young people are looking towards Singapore as well at how well the country has done. Now, let me bring in our next panelist, Sugar Mungsuch, if that's the correct pronunciation, sorry, founder of the Institute for Policy and Leadership. And I also want to know your thoughts on this topic. We, obviously, whether it's a multipolar world, multipolarizing, or multiplex, it's, these terms are also hard to conceive on some level. But let's talk about how can the global majority or the global South be in a position to achieve consensus on the issues of global development, right? Climate change, SDGs, we have the Loss and Damage Fund as an example. So to what extent do you think, from your perspective, the UN system, the existing system, can be better utilized to achieve some of the goals that we have, that belong to the mandate, the common mandate? Thank you.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank CCG for giving me a floor to share my opinions. And today we've heard lots of ideas about whether there is a multipolarism, whether it exists, whether it's a good thing, or whether it already there is. And we've heard that, it's in some ways aspirational. But I would like to address your question from the perspective of Mongolia, a neighboring country of China, and what does it mean for us, and how we as a small country can exercise our agency. In the Chinese calligraphy, the word challenge also can be understood as the word opportunity, and this shifting multipolarity, is it an opportunity for us, and how can we make it so? But one thing for certain is that, and today we started our session with Professor Dr. Wang starting that the UN systems are broken and how we can reset it and how we can make good use of it. And it also means that we are living through a period where the global system is shifting and the new rules are being formed. And I would like to argue here today that multipolarity does not only mean new power centers, it means multiple approaches to standards, governance, and cooperation. And for many countries in the global South, this creates uncertainty. When we operate in areas where the rules are not yet clear, whether on trade, technology, or finance, and world without established rules carries risks. And when systems are fragmented, smaller states like Mongolia, we're going to face higher costs, and fewer tools to plan long term. So this is why the transition between old and new structures should not last long. The sooner we understand what the emerging rules look like, the more stable our development path becomes. And for countries like mine, the challenge is that there are no longer clear role models to follow. In earlier decades, starting from 1990s, development pathways were more or less predictable. Today, each country is experimenting in even large economies, are revising their approaches, like United States leaving the Paris Climate Agreement for the second time. What does it mean? It means that we must think independently, identify what genuinely fits our circumstances, and learn from each other's experience, rather than copy any single template. And yeah, climate change is one area where this uncertainty is especially visible. It affects all of us, but in different ways. And the governance structures around, say, for example, carbon markets, adaptation financing, and land restoration are still evolving. Mongolia's case show how these wider system dynamics play out on the ground. Climate change is already shaping our environment and economy, and it's also starting to affect our neighbors. Sand and dust storms that sometimes engulf Beijing from Mongolia do not stop at borders, they don't require any visas or permits to enter. So in Mongolia, we are taking steps to address this through a number of initiatives, such as 1 Billion Tree Initiative. We are going to pass a new climate change law in Parliament, and we are working on developing a national carbon market framework. These efforts are still developing, but they offer practical examples of how smaller states can respond, even when global frameworks are incomplete yet. This also creates opportunities for cooperation. And here I would like to single out China, because China has significant experience in desertification control, ecological restoration, and climate monitoring. Working together on early warning systems, rangeland management, and technical capacity building would benefit both sides and offer lessons for other countries in our regions, especially in Central Asia. In this way, climate change becomes an example of how Global South countries can articulate shared priorities, not by waiting for perfect global models, but by finding common problems and sharing practical solutions and building cooperation step by step. And we've talked about the importance of cooperation throughout the day. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I mean, especially the last note where action, solution-oriented, people-centric. Maybe that is a good starting point. And that's also where just the recently announced Global Governance Initiative also mentions this, right? To focus on addressing challenges that we face. And of course, I mean, then to what extent individual countries can leave aside some of the small misunderstandings or whatever they have with their neighbors and think about common issues, think about themselves not as just individual countries, but think from a regional and a broader perspective. That's what we've been discussing all day. Now let's now invite Daniel Rahman, who is CEO, Asian Strategy and Leadership Institute, for your thoughts on what the Global South really means. What do you think? I mean, multipolar versus divided world, and most importantly, what can developing emerging countries do to vocalize and to have better consensus?
Thank you very much, Madam Chairperson, CCG, for the invite, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I'll focus my remarks on the ASEAN experience, which hasn't been spoken much about this day. I did a quick count. All of you have valiantly sat through 56 speakers prior to me. I'm number 57, and I must say I've been enjoying it tremendously. ASEAN is a vibrant nation, 700 million people, youthful population, and even for me, I'm a very proud child of a Matni ethnicity family. I'm very proudly also wearing a Malaysian batik to represent. This year, under Malaysia's chairmanship of ASEAN 2025, we have seen many layers of progress and the growth of Global South from this part of the world. During the first ASEAN summit earlier this year, ASEAN-led architecture has seen Timor-Leste join. Ms. Wenping mentioned this earlier. There was the first ever ASEAN-China GCC summit. Then there was the Thailand-Cambodia peace accords, a bit shifty in the last few days. But that also then signaled to the US for President Trump to come down. And of course, remember earlier, even before that, President Xi was in Malaysia. In addition to that, as also mentioned earlier, there have been economic upgrades. For example, the ATIGA 3.0, ASEAN as a whole, the ASEAN-China FTA 3.0 upgrade, and within ASEAN, you've got the Digital Economy Frameworks Agreement, as well as the ASEAN Power Grid. So many things are happening, and ASEAN has been accused of the past of being very sleepy, kind of slow, not yet fulfilled its potential. But what we've seen in 2025, in the back of these discussions about multipolarity and unipolarity, ASEAN stepping to the fore. And as someone who's been very critical of ASEAN in the past, I'm quite proud of it. So this brings us to the question, is it multipolarity or division? Or as Mr. Amersi has said, is it a stagnant order, which I find quite compelling? I think it's a little bit of everything, right? In ASEAN, what we see is pragmatic multipolarity, or my discussions with my global young leaders here representing, they call it poly-alignment. Just now I was talking to Pascal, he talked about relational polarity. So many terms and being thrown about, but the reality is the proof is in the pudding. It's not about choosing sides, we're engaging with everybody. At the ASEAN level, we've engaged with China collectively, but as sovereign nations, each country has discussed with America their approach to tariffs and what treatments are needed and what concessions are needed and what can be given back. So you've got unity, multipolarity at the ASEAN level and in our expression to the world, but you've also got individual sovereignty and agency at the individual ASEAN country level. Now, there is a saying in Malaysia, in Malay, which goes, tak kenal maka tak cinta, which means they who you do not know, you cannot love. And that is the basis of how ASEAN has engaged and approached its relationships this year. Of course, next year with the Philippines taking over, prickly issues like the South China Sea, the Nine Dash Line will all become issues to the fore. But we hope continuous dialogue can continue to ensure that engagement happens and peace prevails within the region. Now, this statement also has another side to it. Dah kenal tergila-gila, which means once you know somebody and you know them too well, you might go crazy. Bit of like an obsessive relationship. Therefore, it's really important in this future order, whatever it might be, that we do not overcommit, but where strategic engagement does not become strategic dependency. The last question I'd like to ask is this. How do we define power or what polarity means, right? And I think that's what's been thrown about. Some have said it's GDP, some it's military power, some it's diplomatic power. But how about this? Beyond all these discussions, we must remember it is the people on the ground who matter. And I think that's one part of this conversation we haven't had maybe time enough to speak about this today is what does it all mean for the citizens of ASEAN and the Global South? It should also be about which countries are able to lift others from poverty, to bring about innovation that enriches the society, to ensure that there's equal wealth distribution. And for me, the power that will lead in this multipolar world will be the nation that's able to do that and to give that. The last point is this. How does this come about? And I believe it's leadership, right? It's ultimately the leaders who are put into power by the people who inherit power from the incumbents that ensure how the future turns out, whether it's one of war or one of collective prosperity, depends on the kind of leadership that we have. And for that note, once again, I'm very proud to have been here in this capacity, but also a few days with the young leaders. So on that, I yield. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that energetic intervention. I'll also connect this with the GYLD panel we were doing yesterday. And I feel one of the differences or something very encouraging among the young leaders and the discussions they were having is that they were extremely people-centric. And perhaps one of the reasons for that is also that in this age of, social media, we have access to things that are happening in the world. The have-nots are just much more visible. They might be relatively voiceless, but they are more visible. I think there is an acute awareness amongst the younger generation of really the degree to which we need to be action and people-oriented. And I hope, that results in more and more empathy. And through empathy, a younger generation of leadership thinking of impact-oriented careers and how they can improve more people's lives. So thank you for that. Now, let's invite Krishna Raj, professor and head at the Institute for Social and Economic Change, ISEC, in Bengaluru, India, for an Indian perspective. I mean, India is now, the most populated country in the world, a big country, and obviously, it's an important perspective to understand on where we are heading as the international order. Thank you.
Thank you, June, for your question. I'll come back to that one later. And I thank the Center for China and Globalization for this initiative, as well as opportunity to be part of this 10th China Global Think Tank Innovation Forum. So earlier, we understood that the world and economies are highly fragmented with the failure of the multilateral organizations, both the IMF, IBRD, and also the United Nations organizations. They have failed collectively to reduce the economic instability and also prevent the global conflicts. When these type of challenges are there, the three initiatives or failures we can identify. One is that the global conflicts are increasing, and unilateral imposition of tariffs is affecting every one of us, and fiasco of Paris Climate Agreement is also a cause for concern. Under these challenges, global conflicts that led to oil supply chain disruptions, causing worldwide inflation, economic slowdown, and imposing high cost on the societies, and unilateral imposition of tariffs on China and India, the American trading important partners, is a major departure from WTO trade policy rules and norms. And fiasco or withdrawal of Paris Agreement endangered especially the growth prospects of the global south, as climate affects the tropical regions the most. So given the global economic and environmental challenges, global south can play an important role in global governance, evolving multilateral institution of their own, not in parallel with the existing multilateral organizations, but more importantly, they can bring governance in the world order. As you know, the global south commands 85% of the population and 65% of the FDI and 42% of the GDP that can play an important role in reforming the global institutions. The challenging task for the global south is how to bring together Asia, Africa, Latin America, and Middle East under the umbrella of global south through credible, predictable, and sustainable economic policies which integrate them together for realizing new world economic order for peace and security, and also economic stability and environmental sustainability. So I propose 3 reforms for the global multilateral organizations that can help a better world. One is that reform of the global governance by including global south countries, India, Brazil, South Africa, and others in Security Council. And China should see an opportunity by reforming UNO with the inclusion of India for a level playing field for the global south. The second one is that global south should bring institutional reforms in finance and development, not alternate to IMF and the World Bank, but Global South Bank can be established by integrating all Asian Development Bank, African Development Forum, and the Latin American development finance, and Middle East Bank altogether. So addressing climate change, one of the important issue, the global south in most affected by the restructuring of economies based on the new technology, innovation, and transfer of finance, because the technology sometimes it is called as helping the future growth. At the same time, the fossil fuel was the new technology way back in 1960s, and that is mainly causing greenhouse gas emissions. So technology can be double-edged, and it can help growth at the present, but in future it may create more problem for the future generation. Therefore, green technologies sometimes we need to view from the how earth materials, rare earth materials will be exhausted in the coming days. Therefore, in order to create a world order that needs to integrate both economic and environmental policies which are more sustainable and equitable to the world, then only we can see a multi-polar world which inclusive of reforms in the UNO, reforms in the financial institutions, and reforms among the countries themselves by democratizing the societies in decision making. Thank you. And India's role as a emerging economy, and you know that the demographic dividend, and that can help the global order in shaping the global order, especially with the what you call it as the Gandhian ideas of sustainable development can create more peaceful world rather than achieving economic interest by various organizations, including BRICS and other organizations. They are basically on the interest, self-interest of economic prosperity, not based on sustainable development or economic stability. That Gandhian thought or Schumpeterian thought and other thoughts, small is beautiful, Sumachar, and others, they have advocated for a peaceful world. Thank you.
That's true. Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's give a warm round of applause. And actually, I think that's, because I'm Beijing-based for 10 years, I'll take your last point and connect it with the Global Civilizations Initiative, but generally the idea that we should understand those philosophies, those perspectives, and understand that they have an equal ability to contribute to a peaceful, sustainable, harmonious world. And if nothing else, just the fact that we can exchange these ideas can make us more open-minded, that the world is diverse, and it will always be diverse. So thank you so much for your contributions. Now let's welcome Sung Yaoming, who is a senior fellow at CCG, for your thoughts. I think we can also now come back to the Chinese perspective again. So China, the mention of the Global South is something completely, BRI, the global initiatives, and the way I see it, I think China is trying to play an important role in creating platforms to improve consensus, but also to improve the strength or capacity of the international order, the UN-centered order to deliver tangibly. So your thoughts on this? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zoon. If I may, I'd like to stick to the remarks I have prepared. Thank you very much, Zoon. Good afternoon to all colleagues here. It's a real pleasure to be part of this conversation. So let me just gather my thoughts for a second on the Global South. So when we talk about the rise of the Global South, I think what we are seeing is really a convergence of several forces. First of all, politically, it's increasingly a collective push for a more equitable and frankly more representative international order, not to overturn the whole system, but to make it work better for everyone. And secondly, economically, if we look at the numbers, it's quite clear that many Global South countries have become major engines of global growth. They are not peripheral actors anymore. They are shaping the direction of the global economy in a very real world. And demographically, this is something we sometimes underestimated. Their young population bring enormous energy, creativity, and potential. That vitality is going to influence global trends for decades. Now, from my own research, I like to say this isn't about dismantling existing system. Instead, it's about reshaping global governance so that it's more inclusive, more representative, so that it reflects the reality of the 21st century. And if we look at China, for example, of course, without making any political judgment here, it's a consistent call to reform institutions like the United Nations to give developing countries a stronger voice. Well, I see that as part of this broader historical trend, a trend where more countries want to be heard, and where global rules work better when they reflect the diversity of the world. So, yes, that's the general direction I see shift not toward confrontation, but toward wider participation. Honestly, we'll see moments of tension because any redistribution of influence comes with negotiation. But I also believe there is a growing recognition that the system simply functions better when it includes more perspectives. So yes, challenges for sure, but also a great deal of opportunity, I think. Maybe I may be repeating myself a little, but let me just underline one thing. In my view, the growing influence of the Global South is reshaping the international system in ways that make a more cooperative, multipolar order not only possible, but increasingly necessary. And concepts such as an idea of a community with a shared future for mankind, which I have examined in my own research, offer a useful philosophical basis for this kind of cooperative future. So, while challenges remain, the overall trajectory, if we allow it to unfold, leans toward constructive multipolarity rather than deepening geopolitical division. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That precisely also answered the question. And what is like you mentioned, the philosophical concepts, and I think also the global initiatives contribute to that. The idea of, firstly, moving closer to collectively recognizing that we do have a shared future, like the astronaut that was mentioned, and like successful regionalism, such as ASEAN and others have demonstrated, seeing beyond interests that are myopic and realizing we have a long-term stake in each other's well-being as well. Now we will invite our Global Young Leaders Dialogue representative, who is also a first secretary at the Pakistan Embassy, Ms. Rabia Nasir. And for Rabia, obviously, if you can share your perspective on the topic we are discussing. We know the ambassador also earlier gave his remarks. And what do you think? Where is the Global South headed? And if you can also raise a very difficult question for our panelists to answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Zoon. It's always a pleasure to be at CCG. It's one of those places where we can have a lot of intellectual and a lot of rigorous dialogue. So for the closing part and also then to lead it up, to round it up with a question, I bring with myself 3 hats. The first hat is a professional one, being a diplomat, being a practitioner of statecraft. The second one is a generational one. So for our generation, that's still not where the boomers are or where the Generation X are, but we are now coming into our own, finding our own voice, but still some way to go. Having spent almost a decade in diplomacy, it's one of my hats comes from there, of course. And the third hat is an observational hat. Being a diplomat stationed in China is a very unique experience because how we view the world and how we view the rise of the global south comes from aligning it with where we are stationed. And when we look at China, the concept of what we call in Chinese tianxia is like the commonality or the convergence of the entire Tian or the universe or the sky that reflects itself in how China conducts its diplomacy. So now coming back to the rise of the global south. As a practitioner of diplomacy and someone who observes the global rhythm, I can very safely say that whatever I've seen, whatever I have practiced, changes or these rises don't announce themselves in very dramatic ways. They build gradually, they build slowly until we know that the change has happened. And same is with the rise of the global south. It has happened. Countries that were once peripheral are now central to the global decision making. Those voices that were figured in very late are now being heard early. They are exerting their voice, their agency. But the question is, and also because I'll take the liberty to raise a difficult question, is that where do we go from here? It's still too early to make a determination. We might like to believe that we are moving to a truly multipolar world, but a lot of this discourse would ring hollow if the power competition still goes on, if the bloc politics still leads to fragmentation. So from what I've seen, from what all of us have seen, that many of the positive changes, many of the reforms come after cataclysmic events. So the goal now is to avoid that and move towards a truly multipolar world rather than a fragmented world. And here I would like to wrap up this discussion with a question to my fellow panelists, is that how do we make sure that we do not repeat the nightmares of history, and how, without invoking any sort of a cataclysmic happening, we truly end up into a multipolar world and not a fragmented world. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you for that comment and piercing, very, very pressing question. Who would like to answer first? Mr. Amersi, if I may. Yeah.
I think that a lot of the discussions here today assume that we live in a very selfless society. Sadly, we live in a world which is extremely selfish, extremely looking for its own interests, and also very aggressive. In this world that we now live in, I find it very difficult to imagine how transition will shift from those that are in a position of power very gracefully to those that are rising. I find it difficult to understand whether those that are rising power have got enough experience to be able to lead an extremely challenging world. And this is why I think that the best thing I would hope for is that if and when the transition is going to happen and is going to be irreversible, it does not happen with a big bang. Because normally when this type of transitions happen, there is a collision, there is a war, there is a world war in which the shake-up is designed to take place first and then a new order emerges. We never ever see, the only time when the transition was orderly when my country, the United Kingdom, which was an empire until the Second World War, handed the baton to the United States and say, you now lead the world, you have the brawn, you have the muscle, we have the brains, we can collectively lead the world together. That was a smooth transition of power. I cannot see today that power will transition. The Global South and the BRICS and CRINCS, and all these are lovely acronyms that think tanks like mine and others love to write about, but in reality, what power does the Global South actually have? What power does BRICS actually have? What power do the ASEAN nations have? If you look at the finance system, it's largely a dollarized economy led by the Federal Reserve of the United States. If you look at the military situation, at last count, the United States had 746 bases around the world compared to 47 collectively for Russia, China, EU, and the United Kingdom. When you look at that disparity in resources, you look at how Silicon Valley dominates the tech world, at least for now. If you look at how Wall Street dominates the financial world for now, if you look at how Hollywood and all the media companies dominate the social media platforms and the platforms which are responsible for broadcasting and for print. And when you look at that dominance, then just try to imagine how that is going to shift. Ask yourself the question, just because the United States and some Western powers are in retreat, is it because they genuinely feel that they are defeated? Or is it that they feel they are weakened? Or do they just say, look, we have been collectively responsible for the world for the last 75 years. What benefit has it actually brought us? It's been a burden on us. Why should we be the selfless people who champion the rest of the world? What does the rest of the world do for us? This is the climate which is prevailing in the United States, where the United States leadership is telling its citizens, we are first, we are alone, and we will stay that way, because all this aid, what does it do for us? Nothing. All it does is that allows these people to come up and criticize us at the UN and in other world bodies. Why should we be doing this? If you are in a position of power yourself, and if you did not have philanthropic intentions, why would you want to do this? This is my answer.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anyone else want to respond to the question? Yes, you do. Please.
Yeah, already it is beautifully explained. One of the biggest problem the world is facing today is that the multilateral organizations, on the one hand, IMF and IBRD and WTO, they promote economic...
Closer to the mic.
Yeah, they promote economic growth, rapid economic growth. On the other hand, the same multilateral organizations led by United Nations Organization, UNEP and IPCC, UN IPCC and WHO and others, they advocate for sustainable development. So they do not go together. Both on the one hand, faster and rapid economic development promoted by IMF and others. UN stands for sustainable development. Both do not go together. There is a divergence of policies, economic and environmental policies. So the convergence are not taking place. So this is creating more problem for the world that results in increasing conflicts and increasing economic interest are being protected rather than the environmental interest of the earth, especially that belongs to every one of us. So this has created two types of problem. One is growing economic instability and economic inequality, and on the other hand, environmental degradation in the form of climate change that is imposing cost on the society. Therefore, in order to find answer to these problems, we need to evolve a new economic order or new economic model that sustain the earth resources and that give a durable solution to sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to all of the panelists, our GYLD commentator, GYLD member. And to wrap up, I mean, I think almost everything has been said, and we may never be on the same page, and that's really not the point. But I'll say a few things. Number one, one of the speakers in a previous panel mentioned some policies or postures might become self-fulfilling prophecies. And, given also the GYLD energy yesterday and today, I do believe that if a younger generation is more aspirational, and this is a generation that has more capacity, more opportunities to defy, ideas or ideologies that make them see the world or other perspectives as wrong. You are able to engage, interact, and realize that there are multiple ways to solve problems. And actually, China, so many other examples, they are successful in alternative solutions. Their governance systems are also different, and they could work for them. So I think a younger generation has a greater possibility of making their empathy and access to knowledge and differences, a plural or a diverse world, and create that into a possible self-fulfilling prophecy where we may see a generation of leadership that makes real solutions and unity and consensus possible. And then I think I want to talk about a little bit about, we are thinking of how the Global South can possibly conceive solutions, and we do have some successful examples, and whether the UN system works, whether it needs reform, whether we need alternatives, I think that'll be a very long discussion. But I think one thing, since we are at the Global Think Tank Innovation Forum, we can all commit to is that Global South think tanks need to engage with each other. Global South think tanks need to observe the realities on the ground and then create networks to understand how other Global South countries are facing issues, solving them, expand your perspective. And I think today we do live in a world where multiple perspectives exist. The authenticity of those perspectives is relatively respected. And I think that is one step towards a world where fewer are silenced and we can find solutions. With that, we do not conclude, we can't conclude, but let's for now, close our thematic forum. Thank you to everyone who's contributed, and we look forward to, more opportunities to exchange. Thank you so much.